So we have a Terran versus Protoss on the new Antigua Shipyard. New map, which I'm going to like, and we'll talk about that in a second. Spawning in the 3 o'clock position in the red trunks, we have our hero for this cast, Dan. Dan White Thing! Dan White Thing! Spawning in the 5:30 position, we have our blue Protoss, named Trebad. Now, Antigua Shipyard is not a new map, but it's recently introduced in one of the Blizzard ladder updates. I think it was the last major patch. You've got quite a bit of space here. We got some smoke vents over here to for other shenanigans, just like on Metalopolis. A ramp that leads down into a natural, which is pretty. It's wide, but just depending on the position of it, it's pretty easy to defend. It leads into a big ramp, which naturally leads up into a third base. The third base over here is accessible by destructible rocks. Then from there, your fourth base is kind of a good decision to make. You have some gold minerals in the middle of the map, but it's very easy to be counterattacked and is spottable by the Zelnaga watchtowers. Also, a fourth base is normally available at either another opponent's third or another base. So with these kind of positions, it favors Dan because Trebad will have to walk along Dan's base in order to get to him. So Dan, with some proper building placement, should know if there's any kind of scouting going on. So as we got into about 15 food, Dan is... looks like Dan's build might have been delayed slightly. I might be wrong just slightly, but gas is coming in. And we see 1 Rax and 1 gas, so nothing too fishy from Dan. And the gateway just finishing for Trebad, and we see the core going down, so it might be properly timed. I just might have gotten excited since it's a new map. We see another barracks coming down for Dan. So we might see a 2 Rax opening from our Terran player, which is actually a really effective opening against Terrans. 2 Rax bio, get maybe Marauder concussive shell, or maybe time some stim and apply some pressure while you expand. And we see Dan slightly adjust his wall so that he can build his tech lab right there. Now our Protoss player is getting a 2nd gas, and he's chrono boosting Warp Gate. He's got a wall right here. I would not recommend walling against Terran, especially in this manner. You've got both pylons will power both of your structures, which is okay. This pylon would be a good spot. This one, however, is very susceptible to any kind of Marauder or Marine fire. And Trebad was successful with that wall off. What you can do with the scouting probe is if you, with your scouting probe, if you click in your opponent's mineral patch, you'll actually slide through or glide through any other opponent. So that way, next time, Dan, when you scout, you can just click inside your opponent's mineral patch and walk right through that pesky zealot. Now Dan is building a Reaper, and we see a robotics facility coming out of Trebad, in addition to the Marauder. So we see 2 reactors on this. A lot of times you'll see a reactor, or 2 tech labs. A lot of times you'll see a tech lab reactor for that 2 Rax push, or Trebad may be utilizing it for tech lab additions later in his build. He's adding a 3rd barracks and a factory, so likely he's going to do a 3 Rax with some starport play. Also adding an engineering bay with Warp Gate wrapping up for Trebad, in addition to that robotics facility. Now Trebad being interesting and getting a Warp Prism first. So he's going to do some drop play or warping some units in a mineral line. Now I'm reading a chat, and I definitely want to tell you guys that looking at a play, yeah, if I scrutinize to the littlest piece, I can probably tell that someone is maybe a lower caliber player, but both these opens are pretty reasonable. And there are very, very little things to tweak to be able to get your game to the higher play. So we see +1 infantry weapons coming from Dan, in addition to throwing down a turret, just to make sure there aren't any kind of cheeky shenanigans going on. Where is that turret? Oh, it's down south. Looks like a Reaper got in and played. I guess I completely missed it. Looks like I was able to get 2 kills with it. We see some Hellions come out. Coming back down into Trebad's base, we see an observer, and we see some units getting warped in. Looks like Trebad's using some of his own brand of special tactics. And that warp gate is planned right to go into the corner of the base, right where that missile turret's planted. So I have a feeling this happened to Dan before, and he placed some turrets just to be protected by it. Now Trebad was able to drop all 4 zealots in the mineral line, but unless those zealots do a critical amount of damage, that they're lost to the cause. So these marauders are able to start firing against those zealots. We see a couple zealots in the mineral line doing some damage, and they finally get cleaned up. We look at the resource counting station. 7 workers were killed by Trebad, which is almost an even exchange. In addition to losing the 2, in addition to losing the 4 zealots, so those are pretty close to a pretty good trade. However, he did lose the warp prism, so if that happened again, I would have just turned back and went home, or decided to find another place to drop. Now Dan expanding, Trebad being a little sneaky and putting his putting a probe and a pylon over there. However, it is within Dan's vision. Is Dan aware of it? I don't think so. Now Dan with the money scan trying to figure out what's going on. It looks like Trebad's going to push out and reinforce with the pylon up there, but Dan's going to clean that up in no time. 2 more barracks being thrown down by Dan, so he's up to 5 barracks. But he still has all of his research, or still has all of his research to do. Reaper at the Watchtower is an excellent, excellent play. Definitely a good thing to do, and good idea to keep that, because then if you need to utilize it for later, you can get the hell out of Dodge. Trebad about 3rd way done on his Nexus, and he really doesn't. He has a lot of gas, so it's him to decide what kind of tech path he wants to consider afterward. Dan throwing down some reactors on his barracks to increase his marine count substantially, getting +1 armor, and getting an armory so he can start getting his further upgrades for his infantry play. Going to the unit counting station, we have 23 up to 24 SCVs for Dan and 26 probes for Trebad. So both players being kind of passive. You kind of have a good indicator of what kind of tech path that Dan's going to be doing. It's likely going to be doing a heavy bio play. It's going to be it's still Trebad's decision of what kind of tech he wants to do. It looks like he's going a little bit more gateway heavy and utilizing immortals a lot. I think he needs to either start upgrading his units, either by using forges, or decide a tech path a little bit further up the tree. So make sure that he gets you know, either some robotics facility so he can, or a robotic support bay to get Colossus or research upgrades for some of his War Prism play, or be able to get some forges to get those 1/1 upgrades. Now both players still being a little bit passive. Dan or Trebad still building probes and building observers, building a lot of observers actually. He's up to 2 and he's going to be at 3, so he'll have a good idea of everything his opponent's doing. Now that probe right there, or that observer right there, is kind of dangerous because it's going to die in a second. So Dan doing a good job of placing turrets around his bases, or around his base. It's a lot of turrets, to be perfectly honest. But better safe than sorry, and as you play a little bit more, you'll be a little bit more comfortable with that. Putting down a Twilight Council for Trebad. Looks like he's going to go either some sort of Templar, or be able to get charged under Blink Stalkers. He does have quite a few Stalkers, as opposed to Zealot, so Blink kind of makes sense. +2 infantry weapons on this way, and stim and combat shields are being done in addition to the constant Marine Marauder production. And we see those 2 forges. And Reaper hop backing in, doing some harassment. 5 kills. And it finally gets killed, so it did pay for itself in kind. We still got a Marine hole in the watchtower, so excellently done. We've also got +1 Terran vehicle weapons being researched. Unless it's a transition to mech play, which is kind of wonky, I would skip that. If you really wanted to get an upgrade, +1 air weapons would be good for Vikings, because normally Vikings will complement a Marine Marauder Force in case of Colossus. Or, I personally do +1 ship armor, so my medevacs are a little bit more resilient, but I'm having mixed success with that with my Terran play. Dan decides that soon is the time. He's got +2 and stim about to be finished. We see some additional pylons being turned in. 1-1 is about halfway done, and another warp prism's on the way as Blink finishes. Now Dan's army is creeping up slowly but surely, and we see an engagement. We see a stim and some force fields breaking up the army in half. But they're able to move in, as you can see right there. So Dan's able to walk right in. Be careful with that, but he's able to move in and mop a lot of these units up. These units are stemmed, but it's not quite a match to Trebad, who is at 0-0 upgrades. Just as 1-1 is about to finish, Dan walks in and mops the floor with it. So Trebad needed to stall just a little bit longer to be able to survive. But Trebad kindly taps out with a GG. So, some good play right there. Trebad decided to do some Warp Prism harass, and it was almost worth it, but he lost everything. Dan doing a good job of obtaining map control and getting some upgrades for his Marine Marauder. And right when those upgrades kicked in, and just before his opponent's upgrades kicked in, he attacked and won the game outright. So good job.